Alright, so today we're going to be doing a quick install video for the 5th Gen 4runner Overland Series rear bumper system. First thing we need to start with is removing the spare tire. So just take out your original handle and drop the spare tire and get that out of the way first. Alright, so next thing we need to do is remove all of the screws and the clips that take the bumper cover off. You'll want to there's a bunch of clips here inside that remove the mud flat. So some screws here, plastic clips all around here. Those all need to be removed. Come along the bottom here. There's more along the bottom, all the way around. Those all need to be removed. Up here by the deck lid, all the way across. Will come off. This plastic cover will just pop out of there. You can take that off. And then all the way up into the corner here by the tail light. Up high here, we'll remove all of those. And then the bumper will be able to be removed.
Put it in the back again. And I'm going to miss it.
We got all the screws and plastic clips removed from around the bottom and rear of the bumper. So to get the plastic bumper off, you'll want to start at the corner here, put your fingers behind and kind of twist out like this. And it'll just unclip from this piece here and it'll come right off. So you want to grab that side, Brian. Start from the inside, pull towards you and pull it out. And then go straight back with it. So we're going to pull this styrofoam piece out as well. And then next thing we're going to remove is the factory hitch. That'll get replaced with ours. So you want to take these 4 bolts out of the back, these 2 on the bottom. Then we need to take the trailer plug bracket out, take those 2 bolts out and just let it hang for now. And I think that's all for the tow hook. Yes. Oh, got to remove the factory tow hook as well. Alright, so next thing we need to do is we need to bend these original tire brackets down a little bit to make clearance for the bumper to fit in. So they need to go down about 1 inch right here. So right now we've got about 3 1/4 inches from here to the rubber seal. So I'm just going to take a good sized hammer and bend them down a little bit. So they were about 4 1/4, so that's pretty much 1 inch there. Alright, yep, that should be enough there. Next thing we need to do is remove the tail lights. So we're going to get in here, take this plastic cover off. You want to use a 10 millimeter deep socket, and there's 2 large studs you can see inside there with a nut on them.
Okay, we're good.
Alright, so we got to pop the taillights out and remove them. You got to pull on them pretty hard to get them to pop loose. So grab under the top here and along the bottom and pull straight back. So after you remove the taillight out, we're going to want to remove this plastic piece. You can twist it and pop it off of those. And then these plastic plugs will need to come out as well. After that, you want to come around to the side and remove this big plastic piece from the body. Take all the screws out, and then you'll need to get it like a flat blade screwdriver in there and pop this and pop it loose from the body. Okay, so after you remove the screws, we're just going to use a large flat blade screwdriver and stick it in between the body and the plastic next to where the screw was holding it on and pry it out from the body. Alright, so when you remove your spare tire, you'll have this chain hanging down from the carrier. Sometimes you can, if you want to remove it, you can cut one of the links with a bolt cutter or grinder and then unwind it and take the whole thing out. If you want to keep it or reuse it, we just take the chain and zip tie it up to the frame here to hold it up out of the way.
So on the trailer plug, we're just gonna unclip these two wires and then pop the plastic piece off of the frame with a screwdriver.
So next thing, these little tabs on the side of the body need to be pushed up to make clearance for the bumper. They bend pretty easy, just push them out of the way. Next thing, what we're going to do on this particular one, we're going to cut the exhaust right here and just remove it. Just because it looks better that way. The bumper fits so close to the body. It's kind of nice to just remove the exhaust and not have it hanging down. But if you want to keep your original tailpipe, you can do that. It still works with the bumper, but what you're going to have to do is remove this rubber mount, and then you're going to have to pry down on the exhaust quite a bit when you get ready to install the bumper, so it can fit in between. But for this particular one, we're going to go ahead and cut the exhaust off right there.
So next we're gonna pop this little plug out here. And that's for the new corner to fit on. And then we're gonna take a 5/16 drill and drill straight through. And there's two pieces of sheet metal that you need to drill through, but you just go straight through and then you can bolt the corner on. So there's the first.
Ready? Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is install these cab corners. This is a filler piece that goes below the taillight, in between the taillight and our bumper. So this attaches directly to the body itself. So we've got our hardware here. These 1/4 by 3/4 button head bolts. These two go in from the back side through the taillight opening first. So we're going to put those in first and hang this in position here, which is down here, right? Yep. And then we've got a washer for each one. Put those on. And then flange nut for each one. We'll just loosely install those right now. The third bolt is going to go through the hole that you drilled in the bottom. Put this one in from the outside with the hardware on the back. Alright, so when you get that hardware put in loosely, you'll want to adjust this panel so you have a nice even reveal along the body here. So it can be adjusted up and down, side to side if you need to. Sometimes you might have to put a washer down here in between this piece and the body to kind of tip the filler panel so that it fits properly. Once you get it all adjusted where you want, we're going to also reuse this one screw that we took out of the original bumper, and it's going to go back in this position here right below where the taillight was. Once it's adjusted how you want it, snug everything down, and that piece is done. So we're getting ready to put the bumper onto the vehicle. We've got all the hardware and brackets laid out here, and we're going to go over where they fit and how you get assembled. So beforehand we had already put this hardware in that mounts the frame mounting bracket to the bumper. These are all 1/2 by 1.5 inch grade 8 carriage head bolts. So you'll install those loosely, put them in from the inside here with a grade 8 washer, lock washer and nut on the outside. And again, we're just going to leave those loose for now so we can adjust it. Once the bumper gets up into position on the back of the 4runner, this spacer needs to be put on top of here between this plate and the frame rail of the vehicle. This one will go underneath, and 2 of the factory bolts will go up through those holes once the bumper gets lifted into position. These 8mm bolts will all go up with washer from the bottom and thread into the frame. That we were just showing you, that where they go inside the bumper, we're going to attach these loosely to the frame first. This large slotted hole lines up with this hole on top of the frame. You can set the bracket in place. We've got this nut that's been welded onto this piece of metal so we can reach inside the frame and put a bolt into it. I'm going to use a 1/2 by 1.5 carriage head bolt, flange head bolt. This piece goes through the hole in the frame, and we reach up to our slotted hole and thread the bolts in from the top. We'll want to leave these loose for now because they'll need to be adjusted once we get the bumper in place. So the next step that we want to do before putting the bumper onto the vehicle, this isn't absolutely necessary. You do not have to adjust any of the body fit here, but this is for larger tires, and some of this portion is visible because our bumper is made to come back way back here and give more clearance for larger tires. So again, not absolutely necessary, but what we're going to do is there's a bunch of room here where this pinch weld can be folded over to make room for larger tires and also look better with the fit of our bumper. So what we're going to do, just sledgehammer, and we're going to bend it over. That should be it. That'll give you a lot more room for larger tires and make the overall fit and finish of our bumper look better with the body clearance. So we're ready to lift the bumper into position on the 4runner. We're going to do that next. We'll just lift it up and get it set. The bumper will kind of hold itself on these original spare tire bars here. So you slide it into position. Make sure you don't scrape the body and the bumper against each other as you go through. Just slowly put it on and it'll kind of rest on here. Once we get it rested in position, we're going to put all the hardware and spacers in place like we showed earlier. The spacers on top of the frame plates, in between this mounting plate and the frame, we'll get all that in position and start threading the bolts in loosely. The first 2 bolts we're going to put in though is going to be these 2 in the back here. That'll help keep the bumper tight up against the frame as we get everything else lined up. bumper can drop. Sit there by itself. Install these provided bolts. They're longer than the factory ones. And they have like kind of a lower profile head to clear this area in here. So these ones need to go on the back so that it clears the cover plate. We're going to use these big grade 8 flat washers to cover that large hole. So we're going to get these threaded in first. Okay, so we got the bumper hanging in position. We're going to put these spacers on next. This angled corner goes towards the inside of the vehicle. Yep, there we go. So lay that into place. We take this large washer plate here, put the factory bolts through it, and go all the way up through both of these holes. Again, we're just installing these loosely for now so that we can get all of the hardware lined up and started, and then we'll adjust the bumper and then tighten everything down after that. So these are the 8mm flange bolts with grade 8 flat washer that we're putting in, threading into the frame here. Okay, so next thing we're doing is installing these bolts into that top plate that we attached to the frame before putting the bumper on. There's a hole here and then one a little farther back. Those are the 3/8 grade 8 bolts. Thread into that one with flat washer and lock washer. You'll probably want someone to lift up on the bumper to get those to line up, and you'll have to get this flat plate needs to be pushed up against that bracket over there and lined up straight so you can get the bolts to thread in. Again, just loosely thread those in until everything's been adjusted. So now that we've got the bumper hanging on the vehicle, we've got all of the hardware loosely installed. We're going to start by adjusting the bumper. We're going to start with centering the bumper on the vehicle so that the reveal is the same on both sides. And then we're going to go ahead and tighten these 4 center bolts just to hold the bumper in the center. And then from there, we're going to work our way around, start tightening the hardware and adjusting the bumper, the tip of the bumper as we tighten all the hardware to get it the same reveal all the way around the vehicle. Okay, so now that we got the bumper, we centered it and leveled it and tightened the bolts in the back here. Now we're going to put these brackets in next loosely before we start to snug down all of this stuff, just because they're easier to put in right now. So these holes will line up with these carriage head bolts that we had held in place with the tape earlier, and then there will be 2 more carriage head bolts that go up from here. So you kind of got to go sideways and then rotate it in so this part fits between the bumper and the body. Come on, get in there. There we go. So you're going to put carriage head bolt in, washer, and flange nut on the inside. Alright, so now that we put our side support brackets in loosely on each side, I came back over here and loosened these bottom bolts just slightly, left the top ones tight because the bumper needs to rotate down a little bit so that we can adjust it properly away from the fender over on this side. So right now we already tightened all of the hardware on the bottom of the frame right here. So those are all tight, and the side pieces this hardware is still loose here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull down on this corner of the bumper to where we want the reveal at the fender, and then we're going to tighten these side bolts, and that will hold it in position. Okay, so we got the bumper adjusted how we wanted. We've got an even reveal all the way along here, and Brian's now tightening all of the bolts on that side of that mounting plate in there. That'd be the nuts for the 1/2-inch carriage head bolts. You're going to want to tighten all of those, and then don't forget the 2 3/8 bolts up above that, with where the flat plate attaches to the top of the frame. You want to tighten all of those on the side first, and then you'll need to reach up in between the bumper and the frame with a 3/4 inch ratchet and tighten the big 1/2-inch bolt that we put into that plate on the top of the frame. You'll want to tighten that bolt last. So we had these 4 bolts tight, just holding the bumper in position. We got everything else on the entire bumper tightened up and locked down where we wanted it. So then we removed these 4 bolts so we could put the hitch on, put those 4 back in, plus the 2 on the bottom, which are factory bolts that came with the hitch. And now we're going to put the hitch cover plate on right here. So these quarter inch button head bolts just thread into the bumper and hold the cover plate on. And if you have a dual swing or the single right hand swing setup, you're going to put this aluminum plate through there as well. That's where the rubber bumpers are going to rest when you close the gate. That way it won't wear through the powder coat on the bumper itself. So when you put these bolts in, be sure not to over tighten them. Just snug them down lightly, because they can break off or twist off in there. All they're doing is just holding the cover for any structural purpose, so just snug them down. Alright, so the next piece we're going to put on is the little deck lid cover there. It covers the gap between the body and the top of the bumper. So it'll come with this rubber edge trim. You just need to put that stuff on first. Start at one end and just work your way down and push it on there. So it just goes in place right here, and it gets attached with the 6mm screws that we supply. Threads right into the body, into the original holes where the plastic bumper used to attach. Alright, so we prepped a few things on the swing out beforehand. We're going to show you kind of the details of where things get mounted after it's on the bumper. But first of all, before it can go on the bumper, you'll have to install the spacers and the bearings and the seals. We'll have like an exploded view on a piece of paper, instruction sheet that comes with it that'll show the order of how they go. But you'll take the sleeve, push the bearing on, put both in, one from each side, and then the seals get pressed in after that. You use like a large socket or something to just tap them in with a hammer. Just make sure you don't put the seals in too far. Just barely recessed below this surface is far enough for the seal. You don't have to actually bottom them out inside the hole there. So now we're going to take the swing out and put it onto the bumper. So earlier in the video, I know we had those stainless slide plates on there, but turns out it's easier just to put them on without those slide plates in position. So we're going to slide the swing out in and put the big 3/4 inch bolt through the top. Alright, so we're just going to thread the bolt in. Usually you can use a crescent wrench for that. You just want to be careful not to scrape your wrench on the top of the bracket here. It'll scratch through the powder coat. So we're going to snug that up. We're not going to quite tighten it all the way yet because we've got a few other things to install on here first. Okay, so now that we've got the swing arm put into the mount, we put the bolt in. We adjusted it. There's really not a specific torque spec for that bolt. We really just tighten it down until you have a little bit of resistance on the bearings so the swing out doesn't slide really easily. You just want it to have a little bit of resistance when you turn it, and that's where you need to set up the tightness of that bolt. So the next thing we're going to do is put this stainless slide plate on there for this pin. The pin slides on this, and instead of scratching the powder coat, so that's what this is for. We've got the little 1024 screws here that thread into the mount, and we're actually going to be changing this, so some of these will just go through and have a nut on the bottom. They won't actually be threaded into this mount, but either way it gets assembled the same way. Alright, so now that we put our stainless plate on there, tightened up those little screws, we're going to put the locking pin in next. So you want to be able to make sure you put a bunch of grease inside so that the spring stays lubricated and it doesn't want to get jammed up in there. So you want to do this when the gate is in the closed position, because there's clearance here for the handle to fit down in there. So you drop that in, thread it right into here, and that'll be a 7/8 inch wrench to tighten the locking pin. So the last thing we did was put the spring-loaded pins in there and the swing outs. So what we didn't show you guys earlier is that we had a bunch of this stuff pre-assembled on the swing outs before we put them onto the 4runner. So I'm going to go through the details of all that stuff right now. Any of these accessories and little pieces and parts can be put on now or before the swing out goes onto the vehicle. It doesn't matter how you do it, but we're just doing it now because we prepped some of this stuff earlier. So the first thing I'm going to go over is the placement of some of these items. So we've got the high lift jack mount here. This is the Max Trax Rotopax bracket. So depending what options you got, you may or may not have these on your dual swing. If you got jerry can carrier, you won't have any of this. The jerry can carrier will just bolt right on. So the Max Trax will have an assembly instructions that come with it to show where all the pieces and parts and which hardware to use to bolt it together, and then it attaches to the swing arm. You'll have to run it all the way to the outside set of bolts here if you want to use the actual Max Trax brand mounting pins. This has to be adjusted all the way over to make room to get the Max Trax off. Otherwise, if you're not using these, you can use like a carriage head bolt like this attached to the bracket, and they're much shorter, so this entire bracket could move over one set of holes if you want it to be closer to the high lift. The high lift mount can move up or down just slightly if you want it to. This is just the typical position where we put it. This bracket here is for the reverse camera. We don't have the camera in there at the moment. In order to put the camera in, you remove these two bolts. Camera goes in from the back side of the mount, and you put the mount back onto the swing out. These pads here, those are aluminum pads that get attached with the small screws. These are for the rubber bumpers where the other gate overlaps this one. There's another aluminum pad down here. So you put the 1/4 inch button heads through, and they thread into the rubber bumper on the back side. And that's the portion that pushes against the bumper when you close it. So we'll get on the inside of the swing out here. So the other thing we did was put in the strut, the open assisting strut. You'll want the swing out in the fully open position, the farthest locked open position to get the strut on. And then, let's see, I think that's about covers it. Oh, the other piece we put in was, this is the little catch piece for the latch that's on the other gate that catches onto here. So you need to install that portion as well. So we'll go over to the right hand swing. Over here, we've got the upper latch. This is the part that latches into the piece I was just showing. And we've got the 3 black rubber bumpers here. They get installed with screws from this side, nuts on the back. The lower latch gets installed the same way as the bumpers did on that side. Bolts go through, thread into the rubber bumper. Then we've got the same strut on this side as we had on the other. This is the camp table setup, so I'll show you the pieces of this and where they go. So we've got the cables, 1/4 inch bolts with nylock nut and washer on the inside. you want to leave those bolts just loose enough so they can pivot. That way the cable will rotate and close when you close the table. We've got the large plastic spacer here with 5/16 bolt and nylock nut, and 2 more rubber bumpers up here for the table to push against. The other thing we've got on this swing out is the tire carrier, of course, on this side. Gets installed with the 3/8 carriage head bolts. There's 6 of those, 3 across the bottom, 3 across the top. There's one hiding in the middle here. And I believe that's everything for this swing out. So I'm going to close both of them and show you guys the how to adjust the latches. Okay, so we're going to close this gate first. You lift up on the pin. That one just pushes right against the bumper, and it has another locking position that holds it in the shut position so that it can't open by itself. And same thing over here, you lift the pin, close the gate, pull out on the latch, lock them together. So to adjust this lower latch, these holes are slotted. You can loosen the bolts, and you can adjust the latch from left to right, and you can also rotate it. You want the latch stuck through the catch just a very slight amount there. There's basically a flat edge where this latch starts to slope. You want this flat edge to be right up to the edge of that piece so that it's fully engaged. So you want it to line up right to here when it's closed. Sometimes you might need to adjust the bumpers, like the depth of the bumpers. You can put a 1/4 inch washer between the bumper and the mounting plate back here, and that'll adjust how firm this handle closes. Up top, we've got the latch that holds the gates to one another, locks them together. So this one here loops through and pushes down. Really what you need to adjust here is these 2 nuts. Those adjust how tight this latches. So you can loosen this one, and this will slide back on the rod and make it looser. Go the other way, it'll make it more of a firm clamp. So you want it to be just kind of a firm push on there. You don't want to have to really force it down. Just a firm close is good enough. And so same thing here, you can put washers behind the bumpers if you want to adjust the bumpers at all, but it's typically not necessary to have to do that. The other thing I wanted to go over real quick is the Rotopax brand mounts. They attach right to the side of our bracket here. You'll want to put them on the whole set farthest apart, and that'll line up with the big 4-gallon Rotopax. So you can stack 2 on there at least. You probably could do 3 if you wanted to. But it definitely will hold 2 for sure. And if you are not using the big 4-gallon ones, you can move one of these to the center and stack up the 2 or 3-gallon ones instead as well. Right here, this is the license plate bracket. So this little piece attaches to this main one, and then this extra one attaches to here, and the license plate goes here. License plate light attaches to there, and the wiring runs through the back here. Also, if you got the spare tire license plate option, there will be a bracket similar to this that will slide over the wheel studs first, then you put your wheel on, and then this portion attaches afterwards. And there's provisions for wiring attachments underneath and a hole to run the wire through for your lights. Last thing over here, this is the ham antenna bracket attachment. That's an add-on. You may or may not have gotten that, but this can be bolted onto either side of the swing out in the 1/2 inch hole that's already there. So what we did here is we provide a new trailer wiring plug bracket that you need to swap out. So this one is the original one. You just have to squeeze these metal clips and it'll come right out of the original one, and you just clip it right back into the new one, and this gets bolted back into, goes like this, yeah, it goes this way. So it gets bolted right back into the original holes that held the original bracket onto the frame right under here. So that just tucks your connectors up out of the way so they don't get hung up on any obstacles or anything out on the trail.